year, for the first time, you guys are going to be delivering the end-of-course exams. So this is a transition from what you've been doing in the past with the FCATs, and now we have the EOCs, and then hopefully the EOCs again in the next year, and then we'll see what happens in the future and the years to come. So we're going to go over some background information for these things. So right now, this is what you guys are all teaching towards. And we've been working with these next generation Sunshine State standards. So you have these different standards through which the biology criteria you're working with in your classrooms and your curriculum. And this is, so last year there was the field test for the EOCs in the different classrooms around the state. And in this year, there is the baseline administration of your end-of-course exams. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's going to happen with these, what we expect to happen with these, what we hope to happen. And then in the next year, in the year 2012, 2013, hopefully the kinks have been worked out. The standards will be set. You'll still be working with these next generation Sunshine State standards. And the goal that the state has put forth is that they want 100% pass rate for these end-of-course exams. If you read all the time, it is very. But what they haven't said what the pass level is, so they could set the bar accordingly. Now. So what you may or may not have heard, so in science, we've been working with these next generation Sunshine State standards. Science standards haven't really been rewritten in about 15 years. What has just happened in English and math is that there has been a switch from the Sunshine State standards to a common core, a national common core for standards. And these common core standards, there's a different philosophy in which these standards have been written, and they have gone so far in changing the philosophy that they do not even align the previous standards with the new standards. And so what is going on right now is there is work underway to write the next generation science standards, which are another national initiative to write these standards. And these new standards are underway. There was a framework, a draft of what they expect these standards to be that was written last July. And there is currently a drafting of the standards that is underway and under review by, I think it's something like 12 different states around the country. And no, Florida is not one of those states. Now, if you're interested in learning more about these standards and the timeline for this, the website is here, and it shows you what the timeline is. We are in stage 1 out of 6 stages for the release of these science standards. So, but it's something to keep on your radar and to know that these changing standards will be coming forth in the future.
You still might have an opportunity to get involved.
That is actually, yes.
Tune in if you're interested and you go to the site and look. I mean, you might have an opportunity for input in it, even if Florida's not one of the states.
So right now the drafting process is going on, but they will be open for peer review, open public comment. It is far from being accepted. And there will be no directive that it must be accepted by certain states. The Common Core standards are still have not been used by 6 different states. So. But since we did adopt the Common Core for math and English, I suspect we would be moving in this direction as well. Okay, so what has happened with these next generation science standards? It was based on this framework. You can read this framework. It is developed by the National Research Council, which is through the National Academy of Science. It is not a federal initiative. It is a state-driven development. And at this point, they're using this framework to draft the standards. And the framework is, so in your folders underneath your agenda, I have 2 documents in there. Don't feel like you have to read them today. But just for your own reference, this is some information. It's on the left-hand side under the itinerary. some information about these next generation standards. So there's an overview of what they are, the philosophy behind what they're about, and then there are some frequently asked questions about them that will go over what the point is. And the point is of these new standards is that we're trying to, their goal is that instead of just teaching students how to memorize, which is not, obviously it's not what you guys do, but they want to address the importance of learning science practices and science skills and the importance of inquiry-based learning within the standards themselves, so that students just don't have rote memorization of the material and have a way to apply that information on a broader context. So they're trying to put that information in the standards themselves and hopefully make these students have skills that are more useful for when they actually do graduate. Okay, so the future deadlines, which you might be hearing about, when it will be open for public review, it should be done by fall 2012, and then they expect to be released sometime next January. So in the next year after that, so definitely you won't be expecting any changes in your standards in the next year, but you can imagine that there could be something on the horizon in the next year or so. But what we are working with now are our current national next generation Sunshine State standards. And so these are some information about what you guys are doing this year. So in your packets, you'll notice that there are documents which show you, let me rotate this, the standards. These come from a document from the Department of Education, their end of course assessment book, which outlines all of the standards which will be assessed on the end of course exam. So obviously this isn't a blanket sheet of all of the standards that you're actually talking about, just the ones that are assessed. And of course some of them, you'll notice some are not assessed. Some are assessed as other standards, so that with that you can expect a kind of a multidisciplinary question on these end of course exams. And in addition to that document, you could also look at the Florida Department of Education website. I'm sure you know most of these, all of the different standards for your biology class, which is available on CPOMs. Okay. Now, in addition, there's some information about the end of course exams and about the design summary of the tests. So there are fact sheets for the end of course exams within each of your packets as well. And I'm going to go through the basics of the test. So your tests, they're going to be at the end of April. They occur during this window between April 23rd and May 11th. The actual date will be determined by your district. And before biology occurs, the students have to have already taken the geometry one. So with the exam, it'll be 160 minutes, 2 80-minute sections, 10-minute break, multiple choice completely. Of those, you'll have these 6 to 10 experimental questions, which are not counted. These ones are usually they're some of the harder questions that the students will be exposed to. And this is the distribution of material on the exams. So 40% will be this material, organisms, populations, and ecosystems, 25% classification, heredity, evolution, and 35% molecular and cell biology. This information, it's on your this sheet as well. So it's not. This is all highlighted. Okay. So with the exam, this is how they plan on scoring your exam. They use this T-score scale, which you don't need to know much about. But what they're expecting is that of this, the statewide average is expected to be about a 50. So 50 does not mean that it's a failure. It means that it's just the average. Exactly, 50 out of 8. Yeah. So information that you will definitely want is the fact that the testing range is this April 23rd to May 11th. The release date of the exam scores will be approximately 2 weeks after May 11th. And we understand, we know that this is a tight window, approximately 2 weeks. That means you will not be getting them at least until May 25th. But it could be later. depending on how late they were taken. Okay, so the other stipulation is that if those students were taking biology for the first time in 9th grade that year, that score must be used to calculate 30% of the final course grade. Now, it will be up to the district to help determine the range for which an A is, a B is, a C is. So there's some leeway in there, but the score has to be state mandate. It has to be used to calculate the grade. And so another stipulation for the students is that they are expected to have at least one practice with this computer-based learning system, which is via EPATS. And if you've attempted to use this EPAT system, it's not entirely user-friendly. You need to follow. We will be, what we've been talking about today, these resources, the PowerPoints that we're talking about today, all of these documents, we're going to be posting on the website for this workshop. And we're also going to be putting different tutorials for some of the lessons that we're talking about today, and that we will, the lesson plans that we're going to be developing at this website too. So it's www.icuff.org. And so all of this, if you weren't able to get all of the notes, we're going to be posting the PowerPoints on this website so that you'll be able to download that. And so what we want to get you to think about a little bit is, so what is, based on these handouts that we just gave you, think a little bit, just your first impressions about what it is you think the goal of teaching is. What do you think that schools are supposed to be accomplishing? What it is that education does for the individual learners? What is the relationship of this to the society as a whole? This definition of school, it's actually a lot broader than just being a place to educate. We're talking about society. We're talking about safety. We're talking about a social conscience within our schools. And we want to come back to what our goals are. So what do you think, for the questions too, what should schools be doing for learners? Okay. So we get a little off of the educational philosophy section, but some very good additional material in here. I think these are all things that we could facilitate the development of these next generation standards. These are things that we could potentially work into those things. So we'll see. I'll see after these series of workshops. I'll see what I can do to communicate with those that are drafting these standards to see what we can do about making sure that all students are accounted for within these sets of standards. So if you do have more ideas, these are things you can feel free to email me, jot them down, and I can help compile a list in order to help with this drafting process. Because now's the time to put these ideas together. Okay, so getting back to this, why we had you think about this is partly because all of us are coming at this idea of education from different perspectives. We all have endpoints that we're expecting our students to achieve, and things that we hope to gain from the experience as well. And we also know that there are multiple ways that our students can learn about material, which is why we also included this, which you've probably seen before. This is your green handout, the 8 ways of teaching, which is the Gardner chart, which talks about the different types of intelligences that individuals have. And so traditionally we know that individuals had these verbal, linguistic, and these mathematical skills that have been traditionally tested for throughout history. And so Gardner has also identified these other types of intelligences. And so we have to try to marry what our goals are with additional ways that we can try to engage our students in the classroom. So we as scientists, oftentimes we could be classified into this naturalist type of intelligence in terms of our interest in nature, etc. But there are other types of, so maybe if we wanted to connect with students that weren't necessarily going to be biologists or scientists, but did have some other type of intelligence, there are ways that we could try to reach out with them, or at least integrate within our lessons in order to maybe to have some sort of trigger to allow that material to really take hold. So these are just things that we want you guys to kind of think about as we go on. And we are going to be having more in-depth series of these workshops during the summertime. And so this idea of infusion of educational philosophy and the expansion of these different standards will be addressed in much more detail over the summer. We just wanted to give you a little bit of information about that to start thinking about it in case you would be interested in thinking about this in more detail. Okay, so